Chapter 1. Brian crept through the darkened aisles of the ransacked grocery store, his eyes scanning the shelves for any signs of food or supplies. The shelves had been picked clean, and all that was left were empty cans and broken bottles scattered on the floor. Wasted, he thought. So much wasted. He thought about dropping to his knees and scraping up what he could from the trash, but the broken glass and crushed bits of food mixed together into a shrapnel soup. No reason to even try. No telling how painful that death would be, eating glass and bleeding out from the inside. He moved to the back of the store, wondering, hoping there might be something in the warehouse area. Not much hope though. If the front looked like this, the back would be the same. Plastic flaps hung across the doorway, an effort to keep the warehouse cooler, a better storage environment. At least that had been the plan back when electricity still worked. Now, the temperature inside the store was tepid, stuffy. As he searched the back of the store, he heard a noise coming from the front. He crouched down behind a stack of boxes, listening intently. He heard footsteps and low murmurs, followed by the sound of glass breaking. Peering around the corner, he saw a group of raiders, armed with makeshift weapons, smashing open the display cases and grabbing anything they could find. Brian knew he was outnumbered and outgunned, but he also knew that he needed to find food and supplies to sustain him on his journey to find his children. He decided to make a run for it. He backed away slowly, trying not to make a sound. But as he turned to leave, he knocked over a pile of cans, making a loud clattering noise. The raiders spun around, their eyes narrowing as they saw Brian. One of them, a burly man with a thick beard, raised his weapon and started to advance towards him. Brian's heart raced as he backed away, his eyes scanning the shelves for anything he could use as a weapon. He spotted a broken bottle and lunged for it, brandishing it towards the approaching raider. The raider hesitated for a moment, then lunged forward, swinging his weapon towards Brian. Brian ducked and dodged, using his quick reflexes to avoid the blows. As the two men circled each other, the other raiders closed in, surrounding Brian on all sides. He knew he was trapped and had to act fast. He took a deep breath and let out a loud scream, startling the raiders and causing them to pause for a moment. In that moment of confusion, Brian seized his opportunity and sprinted towards the exit. He felt a sharp pain in his side as he ran, realizing that he had been grazed by one of the raiders' weapons. He gritted his teeth and kept running, pushing himself to his limits. As he burst through the doors of the store, he saw the raiders in hot pursuit. He spotted a rusty old car parked nearby and ran towards it, hoping to use it as cover. The raiders closed in, their weapons raised, but Brian was too quick for them. He leapt into the car and slammed the door shut, just as the raiders reached him. He breathed a sigh of relief as the raiders pounded on the car, their voices muffled by the metal walls. He knew that he had narrowly escaped with his life, but he also knew that he had to keep moving. As he sat in the car, catching his breath, he looked around at the desolate wasteland that surrounded him. He knew that there were more dangers lurking around every corner, but he also knew that he had the strength and the will to survive. And he would do whatever it takes to find his children, no matter what. Chapter 2. Brian drove the rusty old car down a dusty road, his eyes scanning the horizon for any signs of civilization. The sun beat down on him mercilessly, and he felt a bead of sweat roll down his forehead. He realized that he was running low on water and needed to find a source of hydration soon. He scanned the landscape for any signs of a stream or a river, but all he could see was dry, barren land. As he drove further, he spotted a cluster of buildings in the distance. They looked abandoned, but he knew that there might be water or supplies hidden inside. He pulled up to the closest building, a rundown gas station that looked like it had been abandoned for years. He stepped out of the car, his senses on high alert, and crept towards the door. He pushed open the door and stepped inside, his eyes scanning the shelves for any signs of water or food. He found some old snacks and a few cans of soda, but no water. As he searched the back of the store, he heard a noise coming from outside. He peered through the dusty window and saw a group of raiders approaching on motorcycles, their weapons gleaming in the sun. He knew he had to act fast. He grabbed the snacks and soda and ran towards the back of the store, looking for a back exit. He found a door and burst through it, his heart racing. He ran towards his car, but the raiders had already surrounded it. They laughed as they pointed their weapons at him, taunting him with their crude jokes and jeers. Brian realized that he was outnumbered and outgunned, but he also knew that he had to keep his wits about him if he was going to survive. He searched his pockets for anything he could use as a weapon, and his hand brushed against something hard and heavy. He pulled out his flashlight and swung it at the nearest raider, hitting him in the head with a sickening thud. The other raiders hesitated for a moment, then lunged forward, their weapons raised. Brian fought back with all his strength, dodging and weaving as he swung the flashlight at the raiders' heads and limbs. He landed several blows, but he also took several hits, his body bruised and battered. As the fight continued, he realized that he was running out of time. He needed to find a way to escape and find water before it was too late. He saw a rusty old water tower in the distance and realized that it was his only hope. He mustered all his strength and ran towards it, dodging the raiders as they pursued him. He reached the base of the tower and looked up, seeing the water tank at the top. He knew that he had to climb the tower and retrieve the water, but he also knew that it was a risky and dangerous maneuver. He started to climb, his hands and feet gripping the rusted metal rungs. He felt his muscles burning and his lungs gasping for air, but he kept climbing, determined to reach the top. As he reached the top of the tower, he saw the water tank in front of him, gleaming in the sun. He unscrewed the cap and drank deeply, feeling the cool water quenching his thirst and reviving his body. He climbed back down the tower, feeling stronger and more determined than ever. He knew that he had faced incredible danger and overcome it, and he also knew that he had the strength and the will to keep moving forward. And he would do whatever it takes to find his children, no matter what. Chapter 3. Brian drove down a dusty road, his mind racing as he thought about his next move. He had escaped the raiders, but he knew that there were more dangers lurking around every corner. As he drove, he saw a figure in the distance, walking along the side of the road. He slowed down and realized that it was a lone survivor, a woman who looked tired and desperate. He pulled up alongside her and rolled down the window. "Do you need a ride?" he asked. The woman looked at him warily, her eyes scanning his face for any signs of danger. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded and climbed into the car. They drove in silence for a while, the tension between them palpable. Brian wondered if he could trust her, or if she was another threat in disguise. But as they drove further, he realized that she was just like him, a survivor, trying to make her way in a world filled with danger and uncertainty. He introduced himself and asked her name. She told him that her name was Sarah and that she was searching for her family, who had been separated during the chaos of the apocalypse. Brian felt a kinship with her, knowing all too well the pain of being separated from his own children. He offered to help her search for her family, and she accepted gratefully. Together, they searched for signs of life, driving through abandoned towns and cities, hoping to find any clues that would lead them to Sarah's family. As they searched, they encountered numerous dangers, mutated creatures, raiders, and even other survivors who were hostile and suspicious. But they also encountered acts of kindness and bravery, like the elderly couple who shared their food and water, or the young boy who helped them repair their car. As they drove further, Brian and Sarah grew closer, their bond deepening with each passing day. They shared stories of their past, their hopes for the future, and their fears of the present. And as they searched for Sarah's family, they also found a new sense of purpose, the purpose of survival, and the purpose of helping others in need. One day, as they drove through a deserted city, they spotted a group of survivors huddled together in a fortified building. They were wary of outsiders, but Brian and Sarah convinced them that they were not a threat. In exchange for their trust, they offered to share some of their supplies with the group. They formed a temporary alliance and worked together to scavenge for food and supplies. As they worked, Brian felt a sense of hope that there was still good in the world, hope that they could still find a way to survive and thrive, and hope that they could find his children and reunite his family. Together, they faced the challenges of the wasteland, working towards a common goal, the goal of survival and the goal of hope. And they knew that no matter what dangers lay ahead, they would face them together, as a team. Chapter 4. Brian and Sarah continued their journey, driving through the desolate wasteland in search of any signs of life. They encountered numerous dangers along the way, but they also encountered acts of kindness and bravery that gave them hope. As they drove, Brian felt a sense of unease, a nagging feeling that something was not right. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was something he was missing, something he had overlooked. One night, as they huddled around a campfire, Brian decided to share his concerns with Sarah. "I feel like there's something we're missing," he said. "Something important." Sarah nodded. "I feel it too," she said. "But what could it be?" Brian thought for a moment, then realized what it was. "The truth," he said. "We don't know the truth about what happened to cause this apocalypse. We don't know who is responsible." Sarah's eyes widened in realization. "You're right," she said. "We've been so focused on surviving and finding our families that we haven't thought about the bigger picture." Brian nodded. "We need to find out what really happened," he said. "We need to know the truth, no matter how difficult or painful it may be." They decided to start searching for answers, asking other survivors if they had any information about what had caused the apocalypse. They encountered rumors and speculation, but nothing concrete. One day, as they drove through a deserted town, they spotted a sign for an old government building. They decided to investigate, hoping to find any clues that would lead them to the truth. As they entered the building, they saw signs of destruction and chaos, broken windows, overturned furniture, and scorch marks on the walls. As they searched, they found a hidden room, sealed off from the rest of the building. They forced the door open and stepped inside, their flashlights illuminating the dark space. What they found inside shocked them to their core. It was a secret laboratory, filled with advanced technology and equipment. They saw strange machines, vials of unknown substances, and even human subjects in cryogenic chambers. As they read through the documents and notes scattered around the room, they realized the truth: the apocalypse was not a natural disaster or a virus outbreak, but a man-made disaster. The government had been experimenting with advanced technology and genetic engineering, hoping to create super soldiers and advanced weaponry. But the experiments had gone horribly wrong, unleashing a wave of destruction and chaos that had decimated the world. Brian and Sarah were stunned by the revelation, but they also felt a sense of relief that they finally knew the truth, and relief that they could finally work towards a solution. They decided to use the information they had found to try and find a way to reverse the damage, to find a way to rebuild and create a new world. As they left the laboratory and stepped out into the sun, they felt a sense of hope that they could make a difference, hope that they could create a new future for themselves and for all the survivors of the apocalypse. Chapter 5. Brian and Sarah drove through the desolate wasteland, their minds reeling with the truth they had discovered. They knew that they had to find a way to use the information they had found to create a new future, to rebuild a world that had been destroyed. But as they drove, they encountered new dangers and challenges, from mutated creatures to raiders and other survivors who were hostile and suspicious. One day, as they drove through an abandoned city, they spotted a group of raiders who had set up a makeshift fortress in the middle of the street. They were heavily armed and outnumbered, but Brian and Sarah knew they had to try and pass through to continue on their journey. As they approached, the raiders opened fire, their bullets whizzing past the car. Brian swerved and dodged, trying to avoid the onslaught, but they were hit by several bullets, and the car screeched to a halt. They realized that they were trapped, with no way out. The raiders surrounded the car, taunting them and jeering. Sarah looked at Brian, her eyes filled with determination. "I'll create a distraction," she said. "You get out of here and keep searching for your children. Promise me you'll keep going, no matter what." Brian shook his head. "No, Sarah, I can't leave you here. We'll find a way out together." But Sarah was already climbing out of the car, her hands raised in surrender. Brian realized that she had made up her mind, that she was going to sacrifice herself to save him. He watched in horror as the raiders closed in on her, their weapons raised. He saw her fighting back with all her strength, dodging and weaving as she swung a metal bar at her attackers. But she was outnumbered and outgunned, and he knew that it was only a matter of time before they overpowered her. He saw her look at him one last time, her eyes filled with a mix of sadness and determination. "Go, find your children," she mouthed silently. He realized that he had no choice but to listen to her, to honor her sacrifice and continue on his journey. He started the car and stepped on the gas, tearing away from the scene of the battle. As he drove, his heart heavy with grief, he realized the true meaning of sacrifice. He realized that sometimes, to save the people we love, we have to make the ultimate sacrifice, to give up our own lives for their sake. He knew that he would never forget Sarah, that he would honor her memory by continuing on his journey, by finding his children and reuniting his family. And he knew that he would always remember the lesson she had taught him, the lesson of sacrifice, of putting others before ourselves, and of fighting for what we believe in, no matter what the cost. Chapter 6. Brian drove through the wasteland, his heart heavy with grief and loss after Sarah's sacrifice. He knew that he had to keep going, to honor her memory by continuing on his journey to find his children. As he drove, he saw movement out of the corner of his eye. He slowed down and realized that it was a dog, running along the side of the road. The dog was skinny and dirty, with matted fur and a wary look in its eyes. It looked like it had been on its own for a long time, struggling to survive in a world filled with danger and uncertainty. Brian felt a pang of sympathy for the dog, knowing all too well the pain of being alone in the wasteland. He decided to try and help the dog, to give it a chance at a better life. He pulled up alongside the dog and rolled down the window. "Do you need a ride?" he asked. The dog looked at him warily, its tail tucked between its legs. But it seemed to sense that Brian was not a threat, and it climbed into the car. As they drove, Brian realized that the dog was not just a companion, but a valuable asset. The dog could help him navigate through the wasteland, to detect danger and to help him hunt for food. He decided to keep the dog, to give it a chance at a better life and to have a companion on his journey. He named the dog Lucky, a tribute to the dog's tenacity and resilience in the face of adversity. Together, they searched for signs of life, driving through abandoned towns and cities, hoping to find any clues that would lead them to Brian's children. As they searched, they encountered numerous dangers, mutated creatures, raiders, and even other survivors who were hostile and suspicious. But they also encountered acts of kindness and bravery, like the elderly couple who shared their food and water, or the young boy who helped them repair their car. Lucky proved to be a valuable asset, helping Brian navigate through dangerous areas and detect danger before it was too late. One day, as they drove through a deserted city, they heard a faint sound in the distance. It was a child's cry, a cry of fear and desperation. Brian and Lucky sprang into action, following the sound to an abandoned building. They searched the building, calling out to the child, and finally found a small boy, trapped under a pile of rubble. Brian and Lucky worked together to free the boy, using their strength and resourcefulness to lift the heavy debris. As they lifted the last piece of rubble, the boy crawled out, his face streaked with tears. Brian comforted the boy, holding him close and promising to keep him safe. He realized that this was a sign that he was on the right path, that he was getting closer to finding his children. And as he held the boy and looked into his eyes, he knew that he had found a new reason to keep going, to find not only his children, but to help other survivors and to create a new future for all those who had suffered in the apocalypse. Together, Brian, Lucky, and the boy drove off into the wasteland, their hearts filled with hope and determination. They knew that the road ahead would be long and dangerous, but they also knew that they had each other, and that was all they needed to keep going. Chapter 7. Brian, Lucky, and the boy drove through the wasteland, their spirits lifted by the sense of hope and determination that had been rekindled in them. They drove for miles, hoping to find any signs of life that would lead them closer to Brian's children. One day, as they drove through a dense forest, they saw a faint plume of smoke rising in the distance. They decided to investigate, hoping to find other survivors who could help them on their journey. As they approached, they saw two couples sitting around a campfire, roasting meat and sharing stories. Brian and the boy were hesitant at first, but the couple seemed friendly and hospitable, offering them food and water. Brian and the boy were grateful for the kindness, and they decided to stay with the couples for the night, hoping to learn more about the world outside of the wasteland. As they sat around the campfire, Brian and the boy shared their stories, telling the couples about their journey and their quest to find Brian's children. The couples seemed sympathetic, nodding in understanding and offering words of encouragement. They even offered to help Brian and the boy on their journey, suggesting new routes and offering to share their supplies. Brian was grateful for the kindness, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was not right. He noticed the way the couples were eyeing Lucky and the boy, their expressions shifting from friendly to calculating. As the night wore on, Brian and the boy grew tired and decided to retire to their tent. But as they slept, they were suddenly awoken by the sound of voices and movement outside. They peeked through the tent flaps and saw the couples approaching, their expressions sinister and menacing. Before Brian could react, he was knocked unconscious by a blow to the head. When he came to, he realized with horror that the boy and Lucky were gone. He searched the campsite, his heart pounding with fear and rage. He realized that the couples had betrayed him, that they had lured him into a false sense of security and then kidnapped the boy. Brian knew that he had to act fast, that he had to find the boy and bring him back to safety. He set off on foot, using his survival skills and knowledge of the wasteland to track the couples. After hours of grueling travel, he finally caught up to them, just as they were about to cross a rickety bridge over a deep ravine. Brian confronted the couples, demanding that they release the boy and return him safely. But the couples only laughed, taunting him and threatening to throw the boy off the bridge. Brian knew that he had to act fast, that he had to find a way to save the boy and stop the couples from escaping. He lunged forward, using all his strength and training to disarm the couples and free the boy. He fought fiercely, his mind focused on one thing: to protect the boy and bring him back to safety. In the end, Brian emerged victorious, the boy and Lucky safe in his arms. He knew that he had been betrayed, that the world outside of the wasteland was filled with danger and uncertainty. But he also knew that he had found something precious: the love and trust of the boy and the loyalty of Lucky. And as he drove away from the scene of the battle, his heart filled with hope and determination, he knew that he would continue on his journey, no matter what the cost. Chapter 8. Brian, Lucky, and the boy drove away from the scene of the battle, their hearts heavy with the knowledge that they had been betrayed. But they also knew that they had each other, and that was all they needed to keep going. As they drove, the boy began to cough, his face pale and his breathing labored. Brian realized with a sinking feeling that the boy was sick, probably from exposure to the harsh conditions of the wasteland. He knew that he had to find medicine for the boy, to save his life and continue on their journey. He left the boy hidden in a safe place, promising to return with medicine as soon as possible. As he scavenged through abandoned buildings and stores, his mind raced with worry and fear. He knew that time was running out, that the boy's condition was getting worse by the minute. After hours of searching, he finally found a cache of medicine, enough to save the boy's life. He hurried back to where he had left the boy, his heart pounding with anticipation. But when he arrived, he realized with horror that the boy was gone, without a trace. He searched the area frantically, calling out the boy's name and using all his tracking skills, but there was no sign of the boy. Brian's heart sank with despair, realizing that he had failed to protect the boy, the only thing left in his life that mattered. He felt like giving up, like there was no reason to continue on his journey. But then he remembered the promise he had made to the boy, the promise to find his children and reunite his family. He knew that he couldn't give up, that he had to keep going, no matter what the cost. He set off on foot, his mind focused on finding the boy and saving him. He searched through abandoned towns and cities, following any clues or leads that might lead him closer to the boy's whereabouts. As he searched, he encountered numerous dangers and obstacles, from mutated creatures to raiders and other survivors who were hostile and suspicious. But he also encountered acts of kindness and bravery, like the old man who shared his food and water, or the young girl who helped him repair his car. Brian pushed through his grief and despair, using all his strength and determination to keep going. He realized that the journey was not just about finding his children, but about finding himself, about rediscovering the love and hope that had been buried deep inside him for so long. Finally, after days of searching, he stumbled upon a group of survivors who had taken the boy in and nursed him back to health. He saw the boy's face light up with joy and relief when he saw him, and he knew that he had found his reason to keep going. He reunited with the boy, holding him close and promising to never leave him again. He felt a renewed sense of purpose, a renewed sense of hope and determination. Together, they set off on their journey, with Lucky by their side and a new sense of hope and determination in their hearts. They knew that the road ahead would be long and dangerous, but they also knew that they had each other, and that was all they needed to keep going. Chapter 9. Brian and the boy drove through the wasteland, their hearts filled with hope and determination. They knew that they were getting closer to finding Brian's children, and that the journey had given them a new sense of purpose and hope. One day, as they were driving through a desolate stretch of land, they saw a caravan of people in the distance. They decided to investigate, hoping to find other survivors who could help them on their journey. As they approached, they saw a group of people standing around a campfire, cooking food and sharing stories. Brian and the boy were hesitant at first, but they sensed that these people were friendly and hospitable. As they approached the group, they saw a couple standing at the edge of the camp, looking out into the distance with tears in their eyes. The boy's heart skipped a beat, recognizing the couple as his own parents. He ran towards them, tears streaming down his face, and the couple embraced him tightly. Brian watched with a mixture of joy and sadness, realizing that the boy had been reunited with his family. He felt a pang of jealousy, wishing that he could be reunited with his own children in the same way. The boy's parents thanked Brian for saving their son's life, and they invited him to stay with them in the caravan. They offered him food and shelter, and they even invited him to join them on their journey. But Brian knew that he couldn't stay, that he had to keep going on his own journey to find his own children. He thanked the family for their kindness and hospitality, but he knew that he had to keep going. He said goodbye to the boy and his family, his heart heavy with a sense of loss and longing. But he also felt a renewed sense of purpose, a renewed sense of hope and determination. As he drove away from the caravan, he knew that he was getting closer to finding his own children. He knew that the road ahead would be long and dangerous, but he also knew that he had the love and loyalty of Lucky by his side. He drove through the wasteland, searching for any signs or clues that would lead him closer to his children. He encountered numerous dangers and obstacles, from mutated creatures to raiders and other survivors who were hostile and suspicious. But he also encountered acts of kindness and bravery, like the young girl who helped him repair his car, or the elderly couple who shared their food and water. As he drove, he thought about the boy and his family, and how their reunion had given him a renewed sense of hope and determination. He realized that he wasn't just searching for his own children, but he was searching for a sense of purpose and belonging in a world that had been destroyed by chaos and violence. Chapter 10. Brian drove through the wasteland, his heart filled with hope and determination. He had finally found his way to the town where he believed his children were, but his car had run out of gas. He knew that he couldn't give up now, not when he was so close to finding his children. He decided to search the town for a mode of transportation that would keep him on the move. As he walked through the deserted streets, he saw abandoned cars and trucks, but they were all out of gas or too damaged to run. He felt a sense of desperation and frustration, knowing that time was running out. But then he saw a dirt bike parked in front of an abandoned garage. It was old and rusty, but it looked like it might still run. He approached the bike, his heart racing with anticipation. He checked the engine, the tires, and the brakes, and he realized that it needed some work, but it was still salvageable. He decided to work on the bike himself, using all his mechanical skills to repair the engine and make it run again. He scavenged through the garage, finding tools and spare parts that he needed to fix the bike. As he worked, he thought about his children, and how close he was to finding them. He felt a renewed sense of hope and determination, knowing that he would do whatever it takes to reunite with them. Finally, after hours of hard work, he got the bike running. He felt a sense of triumph and relief, knowing that he had found a way to keep going. But he also knew that he needed gas to keep the bike running, and he needed it fast. He searched through the ransacked town, finding abandoned gas stations and cans of fuel, but they were all empty or contaminated. He felt a sense of despair and frustration, knowing that he was running out of options. But then he saw a group of survivors walking towards him, carrying a few cans of gas. He approached them cautiously, not knowing if they were friendly or hostile. But they offered to trade the gas for some of his supplies, and he agreed, knowing that he had no other choice. He strapped the cans to the bike, feeling a sense of relief and gratitude. He knew that he had found a way to keep going, to keep searching for his children, no matter what. As he rode through the wasteland on the dirt bike, he felt a sense of freedom and speed that he had not experienced in a long time. He felt alive and exhilarated, knowing that he was one step closer to finding his children. He drove through the deserted towns and cities, searching for any signs or clues that would lead him closer to his children. He encountered numerous dangers and obstacles, from mutated creatures to raiders and other survivors who were hostile and suspicious. But he also encountered acts of kindness and bravery, like the young girl who helped him repair his car, or the elderly couple who shared their food and water. As he rode, he thought about his children, and how much he loved them. He knew that he would do anything to protect them, to keep them safe and happy. If he could find them.